Good morning, everyone, and good morning and good afternoon to Mr. Peter and some of our friends who would have joined from Australia and other time zones. Let me welcome all the panelists and the participants to this international session 3 being organized by Onefold in collaboration with Indirapuram Public Schools. We shall be discussing the theme remote learning in rural areas and for underprivileged children. To discuss the oft-debated topic, we have renowned panelists comprising Mr. Arijit Ghosh, Mr. Peter Glendening, and Mrs. Neetu Sharma Joshi. Mr. Arijit is the Vice President, Education Quality Foundation of India. Mr. Peter Glendening is the Managing Director of Achieving Leadership Potential Institute in Perth, West Australia. And we have Mrs. Neetu Sharma Joshi, who is the Director, Urban Programs at Navjyoti India Foundation. We will have the sequence first. We will have Mr. Arijit, then we will have Mr. Peter Glendening, and then in the end we will have our third panelist, Mrs. Neetu Sharma. So let me begin by Mr. Arijit Ghosh. Mr. Arijit Ghosh has been associated with K-12 education for over 2 decades. He has rich experience in policy advocacy, academic research, teacher training, assessments, curriculum design, digital innovation in workspaces. His strength lies in mentoring action research to bring change in classrooms and guiding school leaders to bring change in schools. He has participated in capacity building programs on the theme of 21st century skills involving organizations like DFID, UNICEF, MacArthur Foundation, and many state governments. He has held senior positions with Macmillan, Pearson's, and the British Council. He is advisor for Global Citizenship Education Foundation and regular speaker at national and international fora. He has been awarded Global Teacher Accreditation Award by Cambridge Foundation for his work on critical thinking. So let me now request Mr. Arijit Ghosh to share his thoughts on this subject. Over to you, Mr. Arijit.
Thank you, Colonel Prakash. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all who have joined in for today's discussion from different parts of the world. I would like to begin by saying that I represent a data-driven organization, and we believe that the way we think of the impact of what we do is more important than what we do actually. I'll share a little story. The traditional greeting amongst the fearsome and mighty Maasai warriors is called Kasarian Ingera. I might pronounce it wrong, but English, if you just pronounce it with the spelling, it's Kasarian Ingera, which means, how are the children? Acknowledging the high value that they always place on the children's well-being. Now, with these two initial points, I would like to focus today's talk on the role of policymakers, the community, the immediate environment of a child, which involves the school, the teachers, the parents, and obviously the child himself or herself, the roles which all these stakeholders can play during these unprecedented times. Let's start with the government and the policymakers. The MHRD has done some fantastic work in ensuring that the mental well-being of the students is kept in mind by launching the Manodarpan website. If you haven't visited the site, I would strongly advise you to check it out after this panel discussion. It has not only strengthened the digitization in education and worked on alternate academic calendars, but also focused heavily on teachers' capacity development. Some states have also provided support with regards to broadcasting over radio or television. Now we need to understand the landscape of our rural population a bit. As of November 2019, and I'm just stating a few facts, India has 227 million active internet users in rural India, which is surprisingly 10% more than the urban population. There are around 71 million kids aged 5 to 11 years who go online using devices of family members. With this, India surpassed another magic number of having more than 500 million active internet users who are 5 years old or above. Now, these numbers are obviously staggering, and much of the credit goes to the cheap internet data packs and affordable mobile devices. However, the government needs to focus more on the internet penetration, which is still at not so good 50%. With changing times, the right to education needs an amendment, and I particularly will be very happy to see it renamed as right to online and offline education, which will debar certain governments from banning online classes. Sorry, I'm not getting into a controversy, squashing the philosophy of Caesarian Ingera. Now, moving to the community members, it is a very prominent saying that it takes an entire village to raise a child. In this current time of uncertainty, I think the community members have a very crucial role to play to ensure that continuity of learning does not get affected. It is an urge to have more private and public partnerships in place and volunteering exercises be carried out to mitigate risks arising out of mental and physical well-being, access, equity, obviously unemployment, and a lot of migration-related issues. Now, hundreds of NGOs are already doing a commendable job in supporting several states with learning for the underprivileged. At EQFI also, we have designed a mental well-being framework as a free resource for anyone to explore and do a self-check. So you can check www.eqfi.org, our website, to learn more about the framework. Now, community centers can definitely help in bringing students in one place and broadcast lessons via loudspeakers and large projections. Coming to the immediate stakeholders now, which are pivotal for the academic improvement of a child, which includes the teachers and the parents. For a long time, rural schools and teaching environments, particularly in India, have been accused of adopting teaching methods, facing a huge shortage of teachers, poor teacher to student ratio, and an outdated teaching material. Remote learning definitely has the capacity to address each of these factors and contribute significantly towards quality improvement in the teaching learning process. During these challenging times, educators need to understand that less is more. One should focus on learning rather than just the coverage. The sooner we realize that there are certain topics in the curriculum which are absolutely necessary to know, while there are some which are good to know, I think we will do complete justice to the academic calendar. Strategies like integrated learning, breaking the silos of subjects with experiential learning, focusing more on skills like empathy, questioning, exploration, research, creativity, entrepreneurship will not only make students ready for life but also make them more confident individuals. Now, parents and teachers need to work together for the benefit of the child. The learning program needs to be converted to enjoyable experiences while at home, with opportunities for hands-on experiences, hands-on learning, learning from the environment, and applying free knowledge to solve real problems. Assess more, take regular feedback, and communicate frequently to overcome the challenges that come with a remote learning environment. Parents need to understand the importance of education for the future life and support the child and the teacher in their endeavor. Last but definitely the most important, I will speak a little bit about the student itself. Now, all stakeholders need to work in tandem to make the child understand that the time once elapsed will never come back. It is up to the child to either take the current pandemic as an alibi to not be up to speed with learning, or take this as a challenge and take ownership of his or her own knowledge and wisdom. This is definitely a never before opportunity for students to master the all important skills like collaboration, critical thinking, creativity in a real world setting, skills which we call the 21st century skills. An education which is more meaningful than the one imparted only within the four walls of a classroom. Professor Sugata Mitra's hole in the wall experiment had long before proved that children just need the opportunity to excel in the most unexpected things. While John Hattie, the Australian educator, through his visible learning meta analysis, has proved that whatever one does as a teacher, positive impact to learning happens, and that learning is just a natural process. So it's not that a gloomy picture at the end of the day. Stay positive and keep on learning. Remote learning will definitely carve out a better education system for all. Whatever you do as a stakeholder, do keep in mind Kaseri and Ingera. I would say ask yourself, how are the children? And think of the impact of every single step that you take. Thank you.
Oh, well, very nicely put across, Mr. Arijit. And I think you see you have covered those areas, of real learning, and I think it is very relevant. And we've been talking all along that we should get rid of rote learning. And I think this pandemic has really given an opportunity for real life learning through online learning. And I think there is an opportunity here, definitely. And the other aspect of about involvement of community, I think this again, along with other stakeholders, parents, students, teachers, and so on, the role of community you have highlighted. I think so that is another very important, aspect. And of course, certain further challenges as far as this areas and remote and underprivileged children are concerned. I think that will also get sort of obviated and repudiated, by these whatever suggestions and the aspect that you have put forth. Thank you very much. Let's have our second panelist. We have Mr. Peter Glendening, and as our second panelist. And as I mentioned earlier, Mr. Peter has been managing director with the Achieving Leadership Potential Institute in Perth, West Australia, and is involved in leadership, school and system development. And he's worked with government, senior executive and school leaders to transform schools. He believes in professional knowledge and interpersonal skills to bring about excellence in schools. He's also been a consultant with the World Bank and with the Ministry of Saudi Arabia. He has worked with various leadership institutes across Australia, as consultant. He's attended World Education Leadership Forum in Switzerland, and is also credited with development of national research based response, to address challenges in regional, rural and remote areas. And he has also supported leadership development of aspirational Aboriginal school leaders. Now I would request our second panelist, Mr. Peter Glendening, to share his thoughts on this subject. Over to you, Mr. Peter.
Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to talk to you around remote learning in my part of the world, which is Western Australia. So, and it's probably very timely that I have the opportunity to talk about remote learning in education in Western Australia, because part of my role has been to, as a consultant, to return to a school that was having some leadership difficulties and to be able to assist them through this period of the pandemic. So it's been my background is really around the awareness of the system approaches that we've taken in Western Australia, and also the reality of what is happening on the ground. So, so hopefully my short presentation this morning will be able to inform the discussion. Look, Western Australia has had a long history of remote learning and provision of remote learning for students. If I do a quick comparison of India and Western Australia, just to highlight why remote learning has been so followed so strongly. India has a population of 1.3 billion across 3.2 million square kilometres, which basically equates to 40 people per square kilometre. Western Australia has a population of 2.6 million across nearly 2.6 million square kilometres, which equates to one person per square kilometre. The majority of the population in Western Australia live in the southwest corner. So the population of 2.6 million, 2 million of them live in one capital city. The other 600,000 are distributed across the regional areas. So the need for remote learning has been in place in Western Australia for quite a long time. So what I'll do is talk about the system responses to that, and then talk about what has happened this year in schools. So essentially, in Western Australia, as I said, we have a historical approach. We have on one level what's called schools of the air. Now, schools of the air were put in place around the time that the Royal Flying Doctor Service was brought into being in Australia. And the schools of the air in Western Australia, we have 6 of them, originally started using the Royal Flying Doctor Service shortwave radios and aerials to be able to transmit lessons via the radio to students in remote locations. And by remote, I mean students who are living on pastoral stations, working on their parents are working on mining leases, or they may be rangers within national parks and so forth. So these schools across Western Australia really cater for students who are living at home in their remote location, where they have access to what's called a home tutor. The home tutor may be a parent, or it may be someone who's brought onto the station or onto the mine site to support children. But with the schools of the air, the children receive a synchronous lesson several times a day, which may be half an hour, 40 minutes, across a series of lessons per day. And then they're expected to do some learning and complete some work packages offline with the support of their tutor. So that's a historical approach that's been taken for some time, and it's still quite live and well in Western Australia, again, with the remoteness and with the number of families who are working in remote locations. In those locations, there's a strong emphasis on using ICT tools. So students are provided with laptops, they're provided with the internet connections. They make use of Zoom, WebEx, and so forth to be able to see their teacher. And then the teachers also then visit the home sites. So on a termly basis, so 3 or 4 times a year, the teachers from the School of the Air will actually go out and visit the students and the tutors on site and give some further training. So that's one level that's been in place for quite a long time. The other area, which is other system support we have in Western Australia, is called the School of Isolated and Distance Education. And this school has been in place for 100 years. It used to be called the West Australian Correspondence School. So students actually completed their work via correspondence. And again, this level of support now has grown into where the School of Isolated and Distance Education actually supports schools in remote locations. So whereas the Schools of the Air support students in their homes, Schools of the Air, the School of Isolated and Distance Education supports other schools. Now, by that I mean if a student living in a remote location needs access to an applied chemistry course where the local school perhaps doesn't have a science teacher to be able to provide those lessons in terms of that approach, then the School of Isolated and Distant Education then provides that support to that school, to that student within the school. Again, there's a whole range of both primary and secondary opportunities that the School of Isolated and Distance Education provides to students. At the same time as providing, and again, the school provides its learning via, in this case, via WebEx, and also via a range of internet tools to its students, but it also provides work packages and physical activities to students to be able to complete once they have completed their online lesson or their real life lesson. The School of Isolated and Distance Education also provides coordinators who visit schools across the state to ensure that the learning environment, the online learning environment, is supported within the school, and also that the students are supported with their offline learning, if that makes sense. So the approach by the Schools of the Air and the School of Isolated and Distance Education is really to provide an education to those students who are geographically isolated and who are basically unable to either attend a school or are able to access the resources within a school that you would normally expect within a normal school. So, and that overcomes, the approach that's taken there overcomes the need to have a chemistry teacher teaching in, for example, a remote location like Newman, where there may only be one or two students who are needing to have applied chemistry. But the opportunity through the Isolated and Distance Education is to then provide a composite class drawn from schools across the state to be able to study and be tutored in that particular subject, be it applied chemistry or mathematics or biology or whatever it would be. So there are two system level responses that we've had in Western Australia for some time. Now, underlying all this is has been the opportunity for all schools in Western Australia to be able to access a learning management system, to be able to access online tools, to be able to access ICT resources. But what's happened in most schools, and most schools being around the southwest corner of Western Australia, is that schools haven't really embraced remote learning or taken on an ICT in a fully functional way to be able to address student needs. So Arijit spoke earlier about the opportunity for that ongoing learning and to be able to look at the key capabilities we want with students around critical thinking and critical learning and reflective thinking. ICT hasn't been used in any great way to be able to support students in that approach. However, there have been, the pandemic has, and with the closure of schools, has led to the fact that students and teachers need to take on remote learning far more vigorously than they have in the past. We're a little bit lucky at the moment in Western Australia in terms of the first wave of the pandemic has passed, and we're now in a trough, I guess. We're awaiting what happens next. But the learning that's occurred in that first episode of the pandemic has not been forgotten and actively been discussed, like behind me, in terms of how we'd respond into the future and how this has affected our learning. So what we've found is that there were a range of issues that came up with remote learning for the general population for schools, and this particularly relates to those lower socio-economic schools. Now, the school behind me is located in quite a low socio-economic area for Western Australia. But the issues that arose in terms of moving to remote learning were really around connectivity, the issue of multiple devices being used in a household, necessarily being used in a household to be able to respond to the remote learning from schools, because often we find that with a lot of our families, as the children will be attending this primary school, they may also be attending the local high school, a trade school as well. So there's different opportunities that parents have taken. But again, the access to devices and hardware was a problem. The issue of connectivity, as I spoke about, the issue of bandwidth, the slowness in some cases of bandwidth in terms of students and parents being able to access what was offered by schools was a huge problem. And really the learning environment too. So in some cases, as I was talking to the Colonel earlier, the pandemic has shown us that that has made the connection between schools and home a lot stronger. But we actually were made more aware of some of the environments that our families were living in, working in, and we're expecting them to conduct some lessons through the remote channels with quite a deal of complexity happening in the background. There's also issues around levels of home support. The two examples I spoke to you about around the schools of the air and around the School of Isolated and Distant Education have a background of support for the home tutor and a background of support for the school tutors. Whereas at home, we don't really have that access to be able to give the parent or the caregiver some support in terms of remote learning. What do they do when a student refuses to take part in a remote learning opportunity? The other issue, the major issue, and I'll about this too, the major issue we had with remote learning provision was that we had teachers trying to replicate their classrooms. So they really wanted to replicate the face-to-face learning that they were comfortable with in a remote learning opportunity, and that is not going to work. It's not going to work. It's too time-consuming. The students will not pay attention. The students will not take part in the activities. And the third section, the final, is that it really was that movement away from the expectation around a face-to-face classroom into providing short, sharp lessons which were an extension of learning, which were framed in an open-ended problem-solving way. So there was an opportunity for students to move through at their own levels to be able to complete the task rather than having simple tasks put before them, which could be described as busy work. Rather than being actually online learning tasks. So there were the issues that we had in terms of that asynchronous versus a synchronous environment, the transition from taking the face-to-face learning and putting it as a remote learning opportunity. And the other thing I forgot to mention too is confusion around a learning management system. So even though the department had provided schools with a learning management system, schools were unfamiliar with it when it actually came to the need to use it, and started to source LMSs from a whole variety of other providers, which didn't provide uniformity, I guess, in terms of learning opportunities across schools. So there's a situation that we have in Western Australia, and I hope as we move through this pandemic, that then we'll have further opportunities to develop what we had from the first wave. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peter. I think that was well covered. Your experiences in Australia, and rightly you have mentioned. You see, you have schools, schools in air and schools in isolated and remote areas. And you have arrangements for distance education kind and coordinators who are trying to manage this, and how you all solve the various problems when they started. And somewhat similar experience I think we also had, here in India. And even here, in India, like there are some organizations, like NIOS, that is National Institute of Open Schooling, which has got some massive open online courses. Or we have organizations like the NCERT. They are having various, programs, through SWAM, the government, programs are there, and they are all doing these online. And in fact, some state governments have also gone in, and they are utilizing the TV, because in remote areas, at least television, mostly people are having. And so there are, the forenoon and afternoon, the government, is having, and along with these NGOs, who are helping them, and they upload these videos on the TV, and then they are telecasting this thing. And so that is how it is. So government has also sort of come in and then tried to support this. And NGOs also like UNICEF and Pratham, and there are others, who have gone in. In fact, even we as a school are thinking whether to collaborate, with the local government and see if we can help, certain things. And there are also community sort of TV broadcast is also happening. Maybe even the radio, local radio or the broadcast is also sort of coming in. Right. So let us now have our third panelist, and that is Neetu Sharma Joshi. So as mentioned earlier, she is the Director of Urban Programs, Navjyoti India Foundation, and she is a gold medalist in social work from Delhi University in women and child development. She has experience in development sector with her specialization in project and quality management, training, research, and content development. Our forte is in building and managing proficient and competent teams. I think that's great to have. She has exceptional contribution in the field of child education, skill training, and community development. And their organization has significantly brought down crime rate in the area where they work, by engaging in education and through socio-emotional development work with community and with special focus on the children. So I think Neetu already has a head start in this area. So let us hear her views. Over to you, Neetu.
Thank you, Colonel Prem Prakash. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon to everyone in Australia, across the globe. Greetings from here in India. The two panelists before me have already set the tone for, by explaining the situation which exists and the policy level execution which are happening across India and Australia. I would like to focus specifically on, how an organization, a grassroots level organization, actually goes about executing some of these programs which Arijit and Peter has just mentioned. So, like Colonel Prem Prakash has just said, I represent the India Foundation, which is a 32-year-old organization, and the organization was born, to work on root causes which are leading to crime in society. It is an organization which was founded by the first women in Indian Police Service, Dr. Kiran Bedi, and we've been working at the grassroots level, implementing a lot of integrated community development projects. So one of the areas where we're working is Northwest Delhi, wherein we work with slum children, we work with resettlement colonies, and these are the children who are mostly first generation learners. So the kind of communities that we work in, they're crime prone, high on crime, extremely discouraging health and hygiene conditions, very poor sanitation. Then most of them are first generation learners. Their parents would be daily wage laborers. Then there is no guidance at home to take care of any kind of health issues or education aspects of children. So we'd be working with that kind of a target group. So before this lockdown happened, we were running an education project, a model, which is a holistic model. We call our model Playway to Placement. So we catch children when they are young. We catch children when they're as young as a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old. And we work on a very long-term intensive education model, which is a holistic model, which not only focuses on the academic reinforcements, but also ensures that the child gets all kinds of aspects of personal development, life skill education, healthcare, nutrition, anything which goes in promoting holistic development of the child. And we work with the children till they become self-reliant and till they are placed in society. So even after schools, we help them with linkages of higher education. We help skill training, and then once they are placed, then we keep, they turn into our alumni. So that was the model. We call our model 3S, which is Shiksha, Sanskars, and Skills. The 3S model. Shiksha is the academic component. Sanskars is the value education component. And skill is the skill readiness component, which we try and inculcate in our children right from grade 6 onwards, so that when they pass out from class 12, they are aware of the choice they need to make in terms of their careers. Now, it has always been a vision of the organization to increase the accessibility of its services to other parts of India. We were faced with challenges with respect to, like Peter just said, high vulnerability, of children. The environment in which children were staying is highly vulnerable. They would, they were staying in very small houses, and a lot of them have also been, into vulnerable families, high cases of alcoholism, drug abuse, domestic violence. So these are the children who belong to these families who would not have that kind of an environment at home to promote favorable, to promote education. So that was the first challenge that we had to deal with. The second was extremely, heterogeneous learning levels. So learning, as it is, the learning levels were low. There were gaps in terms of the learning level. Have a learning level somewhere of, say, for grade 4 child. So there are already gaps in learning levels, and there are so within the same class there would be different learning levels. So we had to also keep in mind while planning any multi-graded classrooms that we had. The third challenge that we faced with was, as everybody said, gadget gap. We could not, there were limitations in terms of resources that the children have, the access to data, the access to internet, and our teachers too had this resource limitation, because most of the teachers that we have, the facilitators that who are involved in teaching these children are also from the same communities. So they work as counselors, they work as home visitors, they work as motivators for these children. They act as a connect between the parent and the organization. So they are also from the same community. So we were faced with resource limitation on part of the beneficiaries, part of the organization. The fourth very important aspect that we thought was a challenge was different learning styles, because we felt that every child has a very unique learning style. So when they were coming to the classrooms, the teachers would incorporate the element of different learning styles. Some would learn with projects, some would learn with direct intervention, some needed personalized attention. So how do we also plan, keeping in mind these different learning styles? Some children were not interested in academics, but they were brilliant in extracurricular activities. How do we induct them? How do we ensure that those children are also included through our online, so that otherwise they would have have been left out? Now, the fifth challenge that we faced was, again, like I said, aptitudes and interests. So, not all children are interested in academics, but because we were offering a holistic model in our centers, in our education model, these children were coming to us because some were very interested in art, some were very interested in music. So because of those activities, they were attracted to the education model. So we could not only plan around, an online intervention around academics. We also had to keep in mind these elements. These were few challenges that we were faced with. Then another challenge was we were very particular about the screen time, the time that we wanted to offer to children for learning through say mobile phones. So we were very particular. Obviously, the time of learning got reduced considerably. Prior to lockdown, prior to the pandemic, we were offering a 2-hour class every day to these children, and then activities of other extracurricular activities. So we also had to keep in mind that we do not overburden the child with a lot of online education. We do not children with a lot of avenues, but it had to be a very balanced kind of an intervention that needed to be planned. So keeping in mind all these elements, first thing that we discussed among the team was that we need to understand that we have to begin with what we have. We could not have waited for some funding organizations or some donors to come in, give laptops, give equipments to teachers, give mobile phones to students. We had to begin without losing even a single day with our intervention. So the first exercise that we did was we planned the learning outcomes that we really wanted to achieve with these children in the current situation. So the realistic planning of what exactly the learning outcomes should be in, say, for next 6 months, we planned that. Because that was very important to plan the strategies around what exactly are we trying to achieve with the children? Are we to achieve the entire curriculum with them, or instill values of resilience, of positivity, creativity, like Peter said. So we had to the entire scope, rework on the entire scope of the learning outcomes that we wanted to achieve with these children. Having planned that, then the second thing which the organization did was collaboration. Because, being a grassroots level organization, you would not have resources to plan content on your own. You would not have resources to, have, like you said, Arijit said, data tracking, your data management tools. You would not have that. So, of collaboration happened. We collaborated with a lot of like-minded organizations so that the synergy, so that we synergize, implement on each other's strength. Like we collaborated with Indirapuram group of institutions. Dr. Rita Singh was so kind enough to come forward to help us with content development for these children to handle the challenges of among children. We collaborated with some e-learning apps. So for the children who could download, then we had a lot of volunteers from Australia who are now coming and training our children, on different aspects of personality development. So the key for successful execution of our program. So we collaborated with organizations, we collaborated with a volunteer who kind of helped us to transition everything from the offline mode to bring it online. So he trained teams on Microsoft Teams. We develop a CRM for our dashboards and things like that. So collaboration remained the key. And then we planned on the similar lines. We planned a holistic model for our children. So we planned, academics reinforcement through e-learning apps, through customized development, which came with the help of Indirapuram group school and others, and a lot of volunteers. Then we also, had activities of music, of art, of dance classes, summer festivals. All these activities were implemented through, again, like I said, keeping in mind the limited screen time. Some activities were managed through live classes. Some activities were managed through sending them videos on WhatsApp. Some activities were managed by just sending them the PPTs so that they can, read them as per the time which is available for them. So, and we were very particular in ensuring that what is it that in a week we want the child to do, so that it is a balanced thing, because, we didn't want to overburden child with an English assignment and a math assignment and an art, drawing assignment. So we planned for the week and we balanced it with all sorts of activities so that the child enjoys. And it is a joyful learning experience for the child. Life skill education, positivity, mindfulness training, all those sessions were planned for the children. Another important thing that we did was we called up we are reaching out to about 2,000 children every day through this education program. We called up each and every parent to understand, to know the well-being, because a lot of these parents were out of their work. They were out of their jobs. And without the support and participation of parents, we have got the response of the children. So we called up, every parent was called up to understand the well-being, to understand the needs. There were so many families who were in need of food supplies. So we arranged that. Again, we collaborated with people. People came forward, donated us with food supplies, which were given to these families. So we had to also meet their immediate needs to enable them to participate in the education project. Otherwise, they were running out of their homes, standing in long queues to get the free food, which was getting provided by the government. So we had to do that. A lot of awareness around COVID, a lot of awareness on hygiene practices. So a complete holistic model was planned. Keeping in mind the outcomes that we wanted to achieve, ensuring participation of all the stakeholders, because you could not achieve so much without working alone. You have to work with all the stakeholders. You have to take the support of the local community key volunteers. You have to take support of the subject experts. You have to collaborate with a lot of people to execute such a big project. So here we are. We also mapped. Before the beginning of the execution of this program, we also mapped the number of children who really have access to smartphones. So that's how we kind of plan strategies around it, and we've been able to retain about more than 85% of the children who are submitting assignments, who are active and in the activities. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, Neetu, thank you for a very exhaustive, detailed experience of your, involvement with this online learning and otherwise and holistic learning, I would say. And as I mentioned that, you already been running this institute for some time, or this NGO for some time, and you've been able to look after all the children, or at least and try to help them and through all the stakeholders and for a holistic development. I found this, play way to placement. I think this is a very interesting model, and really, so that would help you and your organization to really get these children to focus in certain areas and ensure that at least most of them they settle down and make a living for themselves. And I think this challenges that you turned into opportunities, especially through such this pandemic times, I think is very praiseworthy. And really, I think all these children, who would be there and all the parents, I'm sure they would have much respect and appreciation for organizations like yours. Right then, so we've had, you see, Arijit and Peter and Neetu cover this subject of remote learning, for the underprivileged and in the remote areas, rural areas. And we have, I think, a fair idea now as to what is happening in our country, what is happening in Australia, and what are the challenges, what are the remedial measures that have been taken or that can be taken. And we have over last 3-4 months, I think, been able to manage, whatever challenges, came by way. And I think this has also given us and the government and other organizations to probably come up with, they have already come up and further crystallize on various framework, that we can have. And now we've listening or hearing much more on things like hybrid learning, blended learning, synchronous and asynchronous learning, from this learning outcome. Now we are talking of competency-based education, as far as here in India, CBSE is concerned. So a lot of these things have come in. And I think this pandemic has been a great opportunity for us. And most of us have seized this opportunity. And we are delivering, I think, fairly well. And including, this remote areas. So there are certain constraints still there. As I mentioned earlier, that our government, through CBSE, through NCRT, through NIOS, and various state governments are using all its agencies, through radio, through TV, through community, and trying to help such children. In fact, even in our school, let's say, the right to education, some children initially they did not have a mobile, so there was a problem. They had just a basic mobile. So therein, teacher would get in touch with, the child and then speak to him, in the morning and the evening and try and connect and share. Sometimes, connect with the neighbor's mobile. So, therein comes in the role of community. So these things have been tried and I think has been successful to fair extent. Right. So now let us come to the question answer session. And there are a few questions which have come in. Am I audible to all three of you? Mr. Arijit?
Yes. Yes,
Mr. Peter? Mr. Peter? Mr. Peter,
yes,
are you audible?
Yes, you are.
You could switch on your video. Let me see. I think if you are okay with bandwidth, you could be on the screen.
Okay. Am I on screen?
Yeah, yes, you are on screen.
Okay.
And Neetu, you're audible?
Yes.
Okay, Neetu, you're having little, glitch with your audio, and sometimes in between it got cut, but it is fine as of now.
Okay.
Okay. So first question, probably between Neetu and Arijit. This is primarily from a government school, I think. This is Alisha Raj, who's saying there are 300 girls in our school and belong to underprivileged society, and almost half of the schoolgirl work as a maid, beautician, waitress to serve, as a basic needs, as most of them have lost their job. Have resulted in severe stress. So what and how would you recommend to conduct an effective online classes with them when there are no resources and they haven't received any help as of now? So would you like to come in, Neetu?
Yes, sure. So there are so many challenges. I always tell my teachers, my team, that yes, we totally accept that there will be challenges. Without challenges, we would not have been there. So we have to understand that there would be challenges. But what needs to be, explained, what needs to be counseled with this target group is that yes, this is a temporary phase. It will pass. But if you, if you let these children, miss this opportunity of education, then already there is a huge learning gap. This gap would widen, and with this, because a lot of these children who leave studies or who migrate, they tend to forget whatever they've studied earlier. So a continuity of education has to be maintained. So there has to be a simultaneous effort. Parents who have lost their jobs, and also we could also look out for resources wherein there are a lot of factories. We have to also identify a lot of workplaces which are giving home work to these daily wage laborers. So they will have to do a resource mapping of their areas where these people live. A lot of places around the these slums and resettlement colonies, a lot of factories are there. So a resource mapping would help, an area mapping would help, wherein you would identify a lot of these people who are in need of workers, because with migration, people in the cities are looking now with relaxation in lockdown. In the cities are looking for people, workers. So they have to map their areas around, so resource mapping needs to be done by the they have to identify organizations who are working in those areas. They can do resource mapping. They can link with potential employers, these people, and then you also have to tell them that listen, upskilling is what is required by everyone, because you had limited skills. You have to become like everybody in India. Everyone is talking about self-reliant. So this is also an opportunity to upskill yourself. This is also an opportunity to understand where how they can utilize this time to kind of upskill, look out for work, and don't let this problem affect the children in the house, because already because of the learning gap, this gap would widen and it would become very difficult to kind of bridge that gap later. So there would be, I think, multiple strategies where to be put in place. Arijit, please.
Yeah, I just want to add a couple of things. So obviously, Neetu did point out some really good points. There is no second thought that these are extremely stressful times. So I think the social and emotional aspect needs to be first taken care of. So I would say, let's say, connect. So with regards to the teachers of this school, I would say connect and care should be considered first before content. So that is very important. Number two is, I think the point which I mentioned right at the beginning, and Peter also seconded that point, that I think we need to highlight the points in the curriculum which are absolutely necessary to know. And then teachers pick out those aspects from the curriculum and create some engaging activities of that content. And whether they have a smartphone or not, I'm not even getting into the resource kind of a thing, but I'm assuming at least they have a simple normal phone. So a basic phone call, which in fact Neetu also mentioned she has been doing with her projects, there are basic phone call in the morning and in the evening, and guiding students individually as to what you are doing is very important. And keep on conversing with the child. So it helps a lot in order to ease down the tension or the stress if you communicate with clarity. So communication is a key during these times, and I think we all are in this together, and we will definitely come out of this.
Right. Thank you, Neetu and Arijit. Yes, I think we will definitely probably be able to get back and suggest to this person and the girl, I think, who's mentioned, Alicia, and I think we'll be able to guide her, I'm sure. And the girls who are there in school should be able to be helped, both for learning as also the employment. which is actually the problem. Right. So I think the next question probably we'll have for Arijit. This is a question from Rajni Garg, who says she's an educator and specializes in homeschooling. And she's in agreement with you that we have to work with all stakeholders and have to work in tandem with one another to help students achieve education. And so how would you suggest ways in which parents of first generation learners are able to contribute in this learning process? So that is her request.
Yeah, I think one is definitely making the parents, even the first generation, to understand that education is important, because there is a drop off by a large population stating that since you are not going to physical spaces, that is the classrooms, you can actually help us out in generating more revenue, because employment is such an issue during this time. So I think the first case is what even Neetu pointed out, that obviously the learning gaps are there. If we don't cater to those learning gaps now, the learning gaps will only widen, and then it will be a really challenging affair to handle. So I think the first and foremost is to make parents realize and understand that this is for the future of your child. The COVID situation, if you compare with the entire lifespan of an individual, is temporary. It might last for 12 months, it might last for 24 months as well. But with regards to the entire life, it is still a fraction of your part of your life. So I think that is the primary importance. The second thing is today, during the remote learning, the online classes, or the help with the teachers or the other volunteers are bringing in delivering education in the homes, the connect between the parent and the education system, be it the school or the teacher, has been more. The parents have gradually started to realize that how difficult a work or a life is of a teacher. What are the efforts which a teacher takes in ensuring that his or her child learns the basic minimum, achieve the basic minimum learning levels. So I think now there, communicating very frequently with the parents and taking help that, okay, this is something which the parent needs to give. It's not only, I'm not talking about, I'm not even expecting very expensive resource to be made available to the child, but resources which are readily available at home where the activities can be done. So that can be helped out with. I'll give a small little example. Like if it's a very primary child, and you are teaching that child, let's say, shapes and patterns, and then let's say every household will have some vegetables or the other. So the parent should actually encourage the child to take 2 or 3 different vegetables and ask them to create maybe an AB pattern or an ABC pattern. Or let's say going around in the household and find out that what are the common shapes which you find at home, be it circle, triangle, square, rectangle. From there, you need to integrate that which one is bigger and which one is smaller. The concept of heavy and light comes over there. So you can also engage into float and sink. So it doesn't follow a very methodical in-school syllabus format, but what I would encourage is take education and relate education to real life. Because please understand that when life throws a problem at you, doesn't say this is a physics problem, this is a maths problem, this is an English problem. So you have to use all your skills in order to solve that problem. So the more you integrate and the more you use real life experience, I think the better it would be.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Arijit. If I may just ask Mr. Peter, although you may not have first generation learners, but what are the experience of learning in, let's say, the aboriginal areas? Are there any some kind of your experience which is worth sharing?
I agree with Ajit and Nita. there's a couple of things from the discussion. One is I think we have to keep in mind that these are very stressful times for both the students, their parents, and their families as a total, and we have to be aware that we cannot be overzealous in terms of pushing the learning expectations initially. It's something that we have to gradually move through in terms of an uptake in the family, because I think sometimes we forget that the issue of the pandemic is making people, particularly young children who don't understand what's happening, making it very, very difficult for them. And I guess the second step is say that we can't expect to be able to deliver a full curriculum to students at this particular point in time. So really, as Ajit spoke earlier, it's about highlighting the key aspects, the key points, and really focusing on those issues around literacy and numeracy, in terms of saying what are the key points that need to be emphasised in the remote learning environment. And also, again, making sure that our parents have the opportunity too to be able to reinforce the learning. So again, it's not saying, it's particularly saying to teachers, don't expect that students are going to be doing 6 hours as they would face to face. It's going to be very short, very sharp, very focused, and then there's going to be some activities, as Ajit talked about, that can support some of those concepts around literacy and numeracy.
Thank you, Mr. Peter. Okay, Neetu, I think this one you could take. And although I think we have addressed this question, one from Mr. Manoj, who is one of our teachers here in Radiant International School. So what role the community and NGOs need to play in this exercise to make remote learning an inclusive one? I think you as an NGO are already doing that, probably the others.
So like yes. Like I explained, you have to, organize. Arijit talked about communication. So organizations who've really invested in building that connect with the communities have been able to sail through this time. I've seen a lot of organizations who were, who have been really investing a lot of time in building that community connect, have been able to sail through this time, because influencing parent remotely through a telephone or mobilizing children through a phone, talking, taking help from the community volunteers. So that all only will happen if you have that connect and if you have built that credibility in the communities where you're working. So credibility has to be built. It cannot overnight. It has to be right. It has to be the essence of all your work. So, the organizations need to identify, like when we started with, this COVID, this pandemic happened, we identified community volunteers because there was lockdown. Our team was not able to get into the community, but we had to distribute food supplies to the community only because we had the connect and we had mapped community volunteers. We had mobilized, we had worked on building, harnessing the strength community. So that is very important, that you harness the strength, you harness what is there in the community, around the community. You have to do that because you can't bring a lot of resources always from outside. A lot of resources exist within the communities. If you look around, you have already a lot of people, who can work as your volunteer. So we have a lot of volunteer base from the same communities who came forward and helped us with food, distribution of food. Our own children, the value we have a model wherein our own children work as volunteers in the community. They reach out to other children of the community through a project called Bal Gurukul. It's like a children's community which is run by the children for the children. So we motivated our own children to reach out to other children of the community. So we began with just 70 children who agreed, yes, they can have access to their parents' phone once a week and they can reach out to other children of the community. So you could, continue that ripple effect. So, for NGOs, there are 3 key things. One is the credibility. They have to work on building the credibility in the community. Keep on harnessing the strength of the people and the resources which are in and around the community. Like I said, it can be a human resource. It can be, a lot of mapping of the the employers around that area. It can be your own, beneficiaries. They are your key, they are the key people who will bring that change in the community. So you have to, take them as your resources. They are your biggest strength. We consider our children as our biggest strength. They are the ones who create the visibility in the community. So do these, these are the few things which need to be done by the organization, and other things would gradually fall in place. So these are four things which need to be focused, I would say.
Thank you, Neetu. Thank you. Well covered. Let me ask Peter again, although probably it will be more, in our type of setting, but one Mr. Pramod asking how to make rural area students and parents believe and participate in online classes.
That's a very good question, and it's again, in some aspects it's no different to face-to-face teaching. So the first element is that the expectation that we need to make the learning experience engaging, we need to make it relevant, and it needs to be, the child can see that there's the opportunity for progress. So making the learning experience in terms of this open-ended structure that I spoke about earlier, so the student can see work that's at a level below them, work at their level, and work at a level above. So they can see they're exposed to work at those and tasks at those, and activities at those three levels. The second point, I guess, for the remote learning situations that I spoke of with the School of the Air and with the School of Isolated and Distance Education, is that there is a home service visit. So in terms of the capability and capacity of parents to support their students in the home is enhanced by visits by the teacher to the home. However, that's not always possible, and I didn't. Ajit spoke about this, and Anisha spoke about this earlier, in terms of saying should be an expectation on our teachers to reach out to these parents and call them, and either email or call them, or visit them physically, in terms of being able to reinforce the importance of learning, the importance of that continuity that we've all stressed is important in these stressful times. So reaching out to the parents and provide, if you like, some support. So in some cases, the Schools of the Air, for example, actually provide an online home tutorial service, so they can actually talk to the tutors to give them some idea about the expectations and helping students with the offline work.
Right. Hopefully thank you, Peter. Yeah, yes.
I just want to add one sentence as a sum up kind of what Peter brilliantly explained. I think we need to redefine the purpose of education. Yes. So be it offline, be it online, why are we educating our kids? So if that message is communicated very clearly, I think no parent will have any problem in taking up it wholeheartedly. I'll just re-emphasize very initially, right at the beginning, what I said, that we need to think of the impact of what we are doing, actually more important than what we are doing. So we need to think of the impact, focus on the impact.
Yeah, right. In fact, and actually, you see, even forget about rural, urban area. Here, rural areas. This is an urban area in my own school, where initially when we started, some of the parents were skeptical, about this online learning, and where I had to probably speak to them and then tell some of them that don't worry. I think in a week's time, we have all taken up the challenge, the students, the parents, and also the teachers. You will find that teachers are delivering very well, and you will be quite satisfied. And sure enough, I think they are very happy now. Fine. And Arijit, I think now this is for you to answer. And in fact, this is from our director, Rita Singh. And what she's asking, to elaborate on your mental, well-being framework you have. So could you do that, please?
Yeah. So thank you, Rita ma'am, for that. So what we did was, as a response to COVID times, and realizing that there's a lot of social and emotional concern of not only children, but the families as well, we created this framework along with a self-assessment rubric and a minimum expectation level. And we wanted to turn a very, I won't use the word negative word, but a dreaded word to something more positive. So we picked up the dreaded word COVID and we made it an acronym where C stands for care for self and others. That is C. O stands for optimism and being positive. V stands for values and beliefs. I of COVID stands for intelligence and innovation. And B, the last one, stands for decision making responsibly. So each of these have got a set of 5 questions or 5 statements in which you can individually assess yourself. So a total of 25 statements. And then there are some minimum expected levels which need to be followed. So you can do your assessment and then check on the minimum expectation level, reflect, and try and improve it.
Very good. I think very innovative way, and that's nice. Very intelligently, put. And I think you are using that COVID in an absolutely positive manner. So very good, Arijit. So there is another one. I think we have discussed probably this question when we had, I had also made a mention. So this is Chetna Sabarwal from Basekra, and she asks, with no internet or devices and lack of teacher training in rural areas, and ensure learning for students. So like here I had mentioned one that, even here in Bihar and some other state governments, they have contacted and then in collaboration with certain NGOs like Pratham and UNICEF and others, and also the government body, and through that DD, Doordarshan and other television channels, they are showing this and having classes in the forenoon and in the afternoon for respective different classes. And I've seen some of these classes. I think it's very apt and very done well, with a lot of activities also and animation and graphics and so on. So I think it is very nicely put. Right. So the other question is from one Mr. Rahul Sinha from Smart Move Academy, and he asks how we educate, in a rural area, to the students who are not getting proper education, and what sorts of things we plan to engage with them. So some aspects have been brought out during, I think, course of our discussion. Would you try, Neetu, would you make some points? So in rural area, not getting proper education, what sorts of things we plan to do to engage them? Neetu, could you hear me? If not, Neetu, Arijit, have you heard me?
Yes, I have heard, but before I address this question, just 30 seconds in basically putting my point across to the previous one of Chetna Sabarwal, if I remember the name right.
Right.
So I would say that there are two ways of looking at a half-filled glass. Either the glass is half-filled or the glass is half empty. Now, during my initial discussion, I did dish out some facts, and 71 million people in India are now, 71 million children aged 5 to 11 year olds are actually accessing the mobile devices, using the internet, using their parents' devices. And we have hit 500 million internet users. So with a large country like ours, we cannot sit back and wait for 100% coverage and only then decide that we will only start solving problems once everybody's needs have been fulfilled with regards to the internet connectivity or the device. So I think we need to be proactive and take the situation as it comes. So the ones who already have access, we need to take a different approach, and the ones who don't have, unfortunately, because still internet penetration is about 40%, we need to resort to broadcasting like radio or television, which are already being done at government level. Now, coming to the next, the second question, what I would say is what in fact I had said earlier as well, that focus on the real experiences, real problems. Don't think education to be confined within the syllabus. Pick out the aspects of the curriculum which has a real connect with the life which you are facing on a day-to-day basis, and get into more of a conversation mode. So it is not about whether you need worksheets, whether you need resources, teaching aids to drive a concept forward, but it's on the point of the future to make it in a conversational manner, to drive across the concept and then discuss more and try and achieve the learning outcomes. I think Neetu has joined in. I would request Neetu to elaborate on that as well.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. There are heavy rains in Delhi, and I think there is some connectivity issue.
So we are only talking of connectivity in rural areas.
Yes. So, the question before that, before I got disconnected, I want to emphasize on one thing. We have to create this value of, understanding what we already have. So once we kind of instill this feeling, no problem. We at least have books of last year. Can we use this time to revise those chapters again? Can we use this time to revise our mathematics chapters? Can we use this time to, read storybooks which we had of last year? We most of the families would have elder siblings. There would be some books for of those elder siblings as well. Can we see what we do? So we have to instill, as an organization, as educators, as teachers, we also have to instill this value of optimizing whatever we already have in hand, rather than talking about what we do not have. Okay, yes, we do not have connectivity, no problem. Do we have books already in at home? Can we continue to practice our maths problems? Can the elder sibling teach the younger one? Surely he or she can. So there has to be these ways in which we continue. The whole objective is that you continue to enrich children with something productive every day, some life concept, something. So that can all be planned. It's all on the educators, how you motivate and mobilize children to make best use of the condition, whatever it can be. Today it is COVID, tomorrow it can be something else. So how do we make use of it? Suppose this problem had happened, say, 5 years back. We did not have so much of internet technology around that time. So still, people would have found ways to kind of continue with their lives. So we have to inculcate this value in educators specifically.
Right.
Just one statement, not mine, but I'm reminded of a statement by Carol Peck, The Power of Yet. So it says that one section says that we cannot do this. Transforming this, so when you say we cannot do this or I cannot do this and the full stop, it's basically a negative connotation. Now add the word yet after that. I cannot do this yet, but ultimately one day I will be able to do this. So it just basically the same aspect transforms it to a completely positive mindset. So it's all about mindsets.
Right, Arijit, that's well said. Let me, there is some question on skill based. So what are the type of skills that, we can pursue now in the lockdown? So let me ask Peter. In fact, we were discussing before we started that here in Radiant School, in Patna, we, as far as skills were concerned, a lot of boys now have learned cooking. We had a cooking we had a summer camp and various activities. We had to see a science lab working, through kitchen. And so I think a lot of these skills have been developed by students while at home, and something which probably were not even imaginable. So I think some of these things have really helped us. Actually, like Arijit mentioned earlier, this is the education we have to understand, and education is actually, all of us know knowledge, skill, and attitude. So skill part, somehow it even gets left out in a normal education. And now in this lockdown situation, this pandemic, in fact, it has given us a real opportunity to develop these skills. So, Mr. Peter, would you share some experience of your schools in Australia?
I think if we talk about the skills, we talk about, as the panelists have spoken about earlier, we really are talking about, we shouldn't be talking about whether the student knows their tables or knows how to use a keyboard. The skills that we should be aiming for are those that the employers are looking for in the 21st century. So it's around the critical thinking, it's around the collaboration, it's around effective team work. So the things that are being used to develop those skills in these situations are those like cooking, working with someone in the household around preparing a meal or preparing a treat. It is around looking at perhaps some of the community projects that students can take part in, which are very, very close to home and doesn't break any lockdowns or anything like that. But in terms of being able to be at a community art event or some small community project, our school took part in, prior to our initial lockdown, took part in what was called a rainbows event. So it was about getting students to draw rainbows, pictures of rainbows around their neighbourhood. And then it was a mapping activity for members of the school to then map where the rainbows were appearing around their community, and at that point using it as almost as an exercise trail in terms of being able to follow them around. So it's those sort of, I guess what we're looking at is those innovative, slightly outside of the way outside the curriculum box that RG spoke about, but which highlight those 21st century skills that we're after. So there's a couple of examples. It's not. It really does rely on an innovative approach by the educators about how we do it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Peter. And in fact, you see these 21st century skills like even leadership or citizenship skills. I think no better time than now to develop such skills. Yeah, Arijit, were you saying something?
Yeah, I think critical thinking definitely is the skill to go for, and one component over there is the ability to ask questions. So basically, in the classroom, in the so-called physical room, we are very much tuned with, we're very much comfortable with teachers asking all the questions, and the children's role is to provide the answer. Why not we flip this? Let's say the teacher during this conversation, which I'm saying, whether it is either through a virtual online class or a normal phone call with the child, says that imagine the answer to a problem is 100. Frame as many questions as you can. That is one way of doing it. Another thing is, another example I would like to give, I actually practiced this with my own daughter, that you take an egg, which is basically an oval shape, rounded shape, and you give a challenge that now a rounded object on a flat surface will not stand erect, so it will fall down. So how can you make it stand erect? So basically, if you put some salt over there, which salt is a crystal, or a sugar, which is crystal, and you put the egg on salt, the egg will stand erect. So even for a middle school or even a high school child who's understanding the solid structures, this can be a problem given to them.
Right. Okay, very interesting. So I think now we are closing towards our end of our program, this webinar. Let me, I think, ask the last question possibly. This is from Meera Balchandran, the president of EQFI. And let me ask Neetu. The question is basically, you see, like you mentioned that you are getting in touch with thousands of children, 1,000, 2,000 children. And so that is quite a task to get in touch with so many children. So, she is seeking some clarification as to how you are able to do that. Yeah, Neetu.
Yeah. So what we have is we have these, like I said, community-based facilitators. So for every group of 30 children, there is a facilitator who's assigned the responsibility of ensuring that the assignments are sent to those children. So as per the grade and as per the learning levels, these children have been divided into different groups. And every 30, a group of 30 children would have a facilitator who would most likely be a teacher from the same community who has been trained to work as a teacher and take care of. So that's how we're managing this large group. And then you have your own organizational hierarchies, wherein above the facilitators you would have project coordinators, and then you would have project head, and then people who would manage mobilization work, people who would manage. So you have home visitors, you have counselors. So there's a team of about 35 people who's managing this entire project of child education.
Right. Thank you, Neetu. And one or two comments have also come in, like this concept of mobile teacher. I think, we discussed that how to sort of get across or get, connected to some of the children or underprivileged area children, or in the rural and remote areas. So yes, mobile schooling or even mobile teacher, I think is a good concept. And that is nice. In fact, I also recently saw a documentary kind of Kerala, in our southern state, where they have a child parliament. And wherein I think they are working very well, and they have ministers of various sorts, and they are really solving their problem of the village and coming up with very innovative solutions. So that is another. And of course, there is another question that there are some of the, especially the migrants and some of the students who have come to village and then have got in this lockdown kind of thing. So probably more now, mostly the lockdown is over. However, in certain states here in India, again, fresh lockdown has happened, like here in our state, Bihar. So presently, as I speak, so we are under lockdown. And so maybe for them, like Neetu suggested, that, books or probably approach, the schools in the community may help. Or in special case, of course, we can probably connect them with the local governments and the local administration. I'm sure that could help. So that's it then. I think let me thank each one of us. And so let me start by thanking Mr. Harijit Ghosh from EQFI, and so aptly put so many, these solutions, and I think practical solutions, and especially your acronym for the COVID. I think the idea you could probably put it in the chat box for others also probably to see, or on the question answer thing. So thank you very much, Mr. Harijit. Then Mr. Peter Glendening from Australia, and that's really great, to see you involved, and you've been decades of involvement in education, and now with this institute. And so your experiences of remote areas with the Aborigines and with the other people, and as I see, in the background you have your term planner and year planner. So I too get an idea to have one at my home also, in my study maybe, and probably use that. So thank you so much, Mr.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Learn from your experience. And Neetu, you've been there already, for over 2 decades in Navjyoti India Foundation, and really I think you are doing a yeoman service. And I'm sure the experience that the participants would have had, from your learning, would go a long way, really, to educate them. And maybe in case some of them want to get in touch with you, I'm sure they are most welcome. Of course. Thank you once again to you and your Navjyoti India Foundation. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity. I totally enjoyed the session.
And I must also thank, before I close, our chairman, Shri Vishal Singh, as also our director, Rita ma'am, and all the people who worked, behind the scene, Deepa, Ashish, Mohit, and others, and all the esteemed participants who I think been part of this webinar. And we shall continue, this engagement, for month-long engagement with Australia. So with that, thank you, all of you. Stay safe and God bless. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much.